more on this, I'm joined by Liberal strategist Charles Bird. He's a principal with public affairs firm Earnscliffe Strategies. Charles, he killed the carbon tax in his first act. Did you expect that would be his first policy decision?
Yeah, very much so, Matt. It was a centerpiece of his leadership campaign throughout the selection process. I think he recognized that it had become one, divisive, and two, a very real political liability for the government of Justin Trudeau, his predecessor. Strange to say those words, his predecessor, now that Prime Minister Carney is in fact Prime Minister. And so the Conservatives under Pierre Poilievre had really politicized the issue to the point where it had become a real liability for the Liberal government by issuing an order in council today to essentially end the consumer carbon tax. It takes away a big piece of the Conservative arsenal going into the coming campaign. And it means that the nickname Carbon Tax Carney really doesn't fit nearly as well, given that he's just signed the paperwork ending the consumer carbon tax. Now, there will still be an industrial carbon tax. Industrial emitters are close to 90% of total CO2 emissions versus 10, sometimes 11% on the part of ordinary Canadians. So this is a significant move, and one that comes with a strong political rationale.
So it's got that strong rationale. When do you think he'll call the election then?
You know, he's apparently heading off to London and Paris to talk to the Prime Minister of England and the President of France, Mr. Stammer and Mr. Macron, respectively. And when he returns, my expectation is he will want to go sooner rather than later. And so my guess is sometime about a week from now, maybe next weekend as opposed to this weekend, he'll be visiting the Governor General, and he'll be saying it's time for an election. And again, the rationale is fairly simple. The Liberals have seen something somewhere between an uptick to an upsurge in its popular support with the selection of Mr. Carney. A number of polls actually put the federal Liberals ahead of the federal Conservatives, which, you know, 3 months ago would have been utterly unthinkable given where the polling numbers were at. And so the thinking is that Mr. Carney will want to move very quickly on that and enjoy the momentum he does. And that momentum is really based on the fact that a huge number of Liberals, 85.9% of the 150,000 plus Liberals who voted, plus a large number of Canadians, really think he is uniquely positioned to deal with this existential threat from south of the border, Donald Trump and the imposition of tariffs against our exports to the United States.
We're running out of time, but I want to ask you about the cabinet before I let you go. This slimmed down version, what's the strategy there?
Well, smallest cabinet in 30 years, which is telling. 23 ministers plus the Prime Minister. A lot of ministers from Ontario, a lot of ministers from Quebec. About 2/3 of the cabinet are either Ontario or Quebec. But what it really says is this is change because Prime Minister Trudeau's cabinet usually consisted of membership in the high 30s, whereas this is 23 members, and this says leaner, meaner, focused on the Canada-US relationship, and all business. And the other thing about a smaller number of ministers is that those ministers will, in fact, have a lot more influence in the government.
That's Liberal strategist Charles Bird. Charles, thanks so much for taking some time this evening.
Thank you, Matt.